The Styrian Grand Prix, a race where Verstappen was flawless, Charles Leclerc was driver of the day, and George Russell was Ethan Payne without the Ethan. To be honest, I expected this race to be a lot better than last weekend's French Grand Prix. But it seemed as if Paul Ricard pulled an Uno reverse card on the Red Bull ring from an entertainment standpoint. Nevertheless, there's still a lot to discuss and determine who the winners and losers were from the second race of the triple header. So without further ado, let's dive into it. Winner, Max Verstappen. Today was an absolutely clinical performance from the Dutchman, and a very bold statement of intent to his rival. Going into the race, the largest margin of victory at the Red Bull ring belonged to Lewis Hamilton, who won by 13.7 seconds in 2020. However, Verstappen completely smashed that today, crossing the line 35.7 seconds ahead of the Brits. Now, to be fair, Lewis did come in towards the end for a fastest lap points, but the gap still would have been around 18 seconds had he not pit. Max claimed his 5th pole position on Saturday, and when watching the onboard, the car just looked perfectly balanced through the corners. On the straights, Hamilton reported that the Red Bull was pulling away by around a quarter of a second, mainly down to them running a skinnier rear wing. So I think at this point, it's fair to say that Red Bull now have a faster car than Mercedes. There were concerns about the brake pedal at certain points during the race, but Max's engineer simply told him to stay off the curbs, and it no longer became an issue. I also just want to mention Verstappen's celebration at the end being probably the biggest flex I've ever seen after a dominant victory. I mean, the way he just slowed down and did some burnouts, as if to say, come on lads, that was too easy. Loser, Daniel Ricciardo. The Australian had actually made a very strong start to the race, moving up from 13th to 9th in the space of just a few laps. He was closing in on George Russell for P8, however, he unfortunately lost power and dropped down to P13. They did manage to rectify the issue, but all the work Daniel did to move towards the front end of the midfield had already been undone. He struggled to make his way through the field after that, and ended up finishing where he started. It was relatively strange why he struggled so much, especially in qualifying, given how he put his McLaren in second in FP2. The speed he displayed on Friday just didn't translate it to Saturday when it mattered most. He's still struggling to understand where he's losing time to Norris, as when he looked at his teammates' data overlays, he was just slower pretty much everywhere. And in a sport where confidence and momentum are so important, it must have hurt to know that he's still not quite there yet with the car. Had he not experienced a loss of power, he likely would have finished higher up, and I wouldn't be as concerned about his form. But the fact that he couldn't make his way back through the field, and the 6/10 gap between himself and Norris in quali, just goes to show that he's not yet in his comfort zone. Winners, Ferrari. The Scuderia had a bit of a stinker last time out at the French Grand Prix. Both drivers finished outside the points and really struggled with tyre wear and race pace. However, the same can't be said for this weekend. Leclerc had a solid qualifying session to put his car in P7, but Sainz couldn't match his teammate's pace and qualified in 12th, failing to get into Q3. At the start of the race, Leclerc made a strong start and attempted to take P6 away from Pierre Gasly. However, when trying to tuck back into the slipstream, he clipped the Frenchman's left rear tyre, giving him a puncture and ultimately ending his race for good. Leclerc was also forced to pit due to front wing damage, and it looked as if he had thrown away a golden opportunity to score big points. But he didn't give up and fought back through the field to end the race just one place behind his teammates in 7th. Charles' eventful race only got more eventful when passing Kimi Raikkonen and taking his front wing. Just like his seat. Carlos was a man under pressure to deliver after a disappointing result on Saturday, but he was hopeful that their strong race pace shown on Friday could lead to better results on race day, and for sure, it did. In the latter stages, the Ferraris were making overtakes left, right and centre, given the pace advantage they had over their competitors. The latest point haul has helped them to move within just 12 points of McLaren in the Constructors, as the battle between those two teams gets ever more intense. Loser, Esteban Ocon. It was another pretty dismal weekend for the Alpine driver, who didn't manage to get the best out of his package. Considering he failed to get out of Q1, his qualifying session was a bit of a disaster. Well, kinda. The Red Bull ring is, to be fair, a very short track, and so the smallest of margins can make the biggest difference. Alpine sporting director Alain Permain stated that Ocon's deficit came as a result of his struggles in high to low speed balance. He hasn't been able to dial in the car as well in recent races, which is something that he and his engineers will need to figure out for next week and the future. As for his race, it was pretty uneventful. I mean, it took him ages to make his way up from 14th, but even then, it was down to others pitting. Overall, he just couldn't extract the maximum potential from the car in the same way he was doing before. Hopefully, he'll be back to his best in a week's time at the same venue. Winners: Lando Norris and George Russell. Now, I would have covered these two separately, but I'm struggling to find many losers from this race, so to balance it out, I'll discuss both Norris and Russell in the same segment. The future of British racing really looks to be in good hands. Lando has been in the form of his life in 2021 and still remains the only driver on the grid to score points in every single race this season. His third consecutive P5 means that he's tied with Max Verstappen for the most top 5 finishes on the grid. To me, that's pretty insane. He had another fantastic qualifying session to put his McLaren on the second row and managed to hold off Sergio Perez to maintain P3. His move around the outside at turn 4 was absolutely spectacular, given the level of risk involved. He didn't have the pace to keep Checo or Bottas behind for much longer, but did a fine job for the remaining laps to secure another 10 championship points. As for Russell, you might wonder why I've counted him as a winner, even though he missed out on points through no fault of his own. But that's exactly the reason why. Prior to his pneumatics problem, George was having a stellar weekend. A storming lap in qualifying led to him missing out on a spot in the final shootout by just 0.08 of a second, but gave him free tyre choice for the race. After Tsunoda was handed a penalty, he was then promoted to start P10, which was even better. He got away well and was comfortably running in P8 with very solid race pace before the issue hit. However, he still held his head up high and told his team, "We're in this together," which shows the mark of a true team leader. His performance this weekend will most definitely impress Toto Wolff and improve his chances of securing the Mercedes seats for 2022. Losers: Mercedes. I don't really have too much to say on Mercedes because they didn't really do too much wrong. They just didn't have the pace compared to Red Bull, and the margin of victory Verstappen had over them today must have been a huge punch in the guts. Hamilton seemed to have no answer to what Red Bull and Verstappen could do, and Valtteri only just about managed to fend off Sergio Perez, who probably would have finished ahead of the Finn had it not been for a slow pit stop. It's safe to say that Mercedes are behind at this point. They will need to continue pushing in all areas if they want to beat Max and Red Bull this year, because at this moment in time, they look formidable. Winner: Fernando Alonso. This is more like the Fernando we're used to seeing. The Spaniard was beaming with confidence after qualifying within the top 10 on Saturday and felt a lot happier in the car. After the Q2 lap that led him into Q3, he wasn't too worried about his position and just said he enjoyed the lap as a whole. He managed to make his way up to P7 by lap 13, however, he was later overtaken by 2 charging Ferraris in Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz. However, he was still satisfied with a P9 finish, as it was realistically the maximum results they could have achieved. Who were your winners and losers from the Styrian Grand Prix? Be sure to let me know down in the comment section below. As always, please like this video to help it get out to more people, share it around with your friends, and subscribe to the channel with bell notifications to keep up to date with the latest content in the future. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.